Well, welcome to today's webinar titled Deep Data Discovery Made Easy. This is going to last about 30 minutes, and then we'll have a question and answer period at the end. I'm Doug Cogswell. I'm your host today. I have an extensive experience in the business intelligence sector and also just data analytics and consulting in general in a variety of industry capacities in a variety of industries and companies. And I'm excited today to be talking about a key area of data discovery, especially with not only standard commercial data, but also what's known as dark data. So today, we're going to talk about that, commercial versus dark data. There's been a lot of press on this in the analysts and some of the industry blogs. The data that's not often stored and used in analytics can be, and it can provide incredible insights. And we're going to talk conceptually and go into some examples about how to do that. We're going to look at data blending and prep using a flexible analytical sandbox to bring in data and to synthesize it and to model against it. We're going to build some predictive models to try to understand new information we pick up. Extremely interactive visualization, no coding predictive modeling so that business end users can actually do this kind of work. We're going to talk about high return on investments, about getting this right, how it leads to faster and more informed decisions, and then we'll have time at the end for a question and answer. So the premise behind all of this, in order to be competitive in today's marketplace, your data needs to be organized and actionable, all of it. Today, most business intelligence has been focused on making sense of standard sales, customer, and financial data in commercial systems, and that's the stuff that typically sits in SQL Server or Oracle, comes in from an ERP system. Yet a huge amount of dark data is getting produced. Machine systems, event management systems, email sends, and detailed click-throughs. This data is highly relevant to the decision-making process, but is often the exhaust of other processes and left on the sidelines and then forgotten. So the purpose of this data is not to understand customers or to enter orders. It's to run something else or do something else. But it's hugely valuable if it's brought in and synthesized in an appropriate way and can be linked to and integrated with the rest of the data. So with new tools, this data can be brought into the light and integrated with standard commercial data to create a 360-degree view of the customer, the products, the production process, the market. And we see this a lot. So we're going to run through some examples. We're going to focus on fundraising today because that's where a lot of the audience is from. And you have core data, which would typically come in from the Banner, Advance, Razor's Edge, Blackbaud CRM system, ERP or CRM system. But often there's events, newsletter click-throughs, alumni surveys. There's a range of other stuff that gets collected. Usually it sits in Excel spreadsheets or Access tables. It could even be paper sitting around somewhere. And we'll show you how this can be really relevant. We do a lot of work in manufacturing. The core systems there focus on orders and customers and getting them through and out, and they do a great job. There's usually machines that are run by some kind of computer, and they track logs on every event that happens in those machines over every shift. There's shipping tracking, which where the trucks are going and what's going on, and usually this data is sitting there in those systems. It's log transaction data, but it can be hugely valuable because if you start seeing, for example, customer delays, the detail on what actually is happening is in these log files, and if it can be brought out, it really can help to see patterns and better understand and make better decisions. In healthcare, the typical systems of billing, electronic medical record, but then there's encounters, there's physician data, referring physician data, there's peer data, there's all this other stuff that if you can bring it together, really helps you understand where your patients are coming from, how they're progressing through your organization compared to others, and lets you get into the level of detail where you can take action. And we've seen just some dramatic results. There's also some of the healthcare providers in certain disciplines also have the machine data that looks a lot like manufacturing. For example, in medical and radiation oncology, there are large imaging or radiation machines that create the same kind of log data, or in diagnostic imaging. We also see this in security and event intrusion. We'll see an example in consumer packaged goods. So we're going to go through right now an example in fundraising, then cycle back to consumer packaged goods, and then show some how do you actually do this. So let's dive in. So pretend we're a fundraising group. We've got a list of maybe a couple 100,000 prospects. And we're trying to understand the characteristics of my larger donors and then determine who else has those same characteristics because ideally they'd make the most attractive prospects. So there's typically a core system, and again, this could be Banner or it could be Advanced, Blackbaud, Razor's Edge, Millennium. There's a whole bunch of them. They're all conceptually the same. And usually the center of these systems is the entities or the prospects. And if you go back to manufacturing or healthcare, there's patients, there's customers, the same structurally conceptual content. And the entity table is going to have stuff about biographical information, age, where they live. There may be wealth scoring or rating in there. Usually that's collected on the outside and brought in. That's typically going to be in this table. You're going to know which class they graduated in, what their affiliation is. On the other examples, you can have similar kinds of records about the people or the customers or the things. But there's more. For example, there's degrees, and there's detailed records of everybody's degree. Now, by itself, if you're trying to answer the question above, what are the characteristics of my larger donors, you need to do something with it. So maybe you want to go into the degrees table and identify advanced degrees, or maybe MBAs or law degrees or MD degrees, and use those because those could be, as you're hypothesizing characteristics of larger donors, maybe these kinds of degrees set people apart. They tend to make more money if they have these degrees, so maybe they are better donors. And then you think about the employment table. Usually these systems have tracking of employment, present and past, and it may or may not be fully up to date. We obviously urge it to be more up to date. When you think about that, that would generally have titles, so you can synthesize those employment records and figure out, was this a C-level job? Is the word president or chief or vice president or something in it? The field of work, I mean, some fields of work are going to lead to higher income, and if you're trying to find the characteristics of the larger donors, that probably has something to do with it. Then you think about student activities, and there's usually lists of these things. At a base level, why don't we just go to that table and figure out how many sports they played, how many student activities they've been in. That might be illustrative because they were maybe more connected, more attached to the organization back when they were going there. Then there's giving. All of these systems have giving data. If you just have raw transactions, that's probably not particularly useful at that level. And if you have total giving, well, you're trying to find the characteristics of the large donors. You want to find the others who aren't the large donors who have the characteristics, so you don't want to just look at total giving. But you can easily look at how many of the last 5 years have they made a gift. That's sort of a frequency measure. And maybe go back and look at the 6 to 10 years. So you're looking at 10 years of giving at the year level. And maybe the biggest gift they've made, because if you see consistency of giving and they've made a large gift, that might be more like my large donors. Then the light goes on. Hey, I bet there's some other stuff over here in these other things that come in, and we see this a lot. Like often event attendance is not in the core system. It could be, that's great, but often it's tracked somewhere else. If you're not capturing it, or if it's in paper, as we've seen in some cases, we urge to get it into a system. And it's not that they've been to an event, but you can start parsing out of this how many events have they been to, the number L5Y, the number of the last 5 years. 5 years, how many have they been to? This has a tail. I mean, if they went to an event 20 years ago, it probably doesn't matter, but they've been to a lot in the last 5 years. It may be meaningful. What about 6 to 10 years back? Then you might say maybe all the events aren't the same. You can actually use modeling tools. We'll look at this a little bit later to call out that some of these types of events or named events are more connected with the large donors than others, and you might want to know that and create a flag for that out of the event attendance table. You could also look at maybe there's volunteer committees in here where there's a higher level of engagement. You could flag that out of this. So we would call this kind of work synthesis, where you're taking this event attendance and you're creating metrics out of it that could be useful, and then we're going to want to look at our Analytical Sandbox in a few minutes and experiment with them and look around, or a technical term might be muck around in the data to see what really is aligned. Newsletter click-throughs, everybody is sending out electronic newsletters. The click-throughs, we're actually going to do an example of this in a few minutes, are stored somewhere. It might be in your system, it might be at your hoster. You can get these things, and some of them make it harder than others. But you can look in here, the number in the last 12 months of clicks. And this obviously has a tail too. If they clicked on the newsletter 2 years ago, it's probably irrelevant. But if they clicked on 10 times in the last 3 months, they're pretty engaged. And they're also telling you their interests. They're clicking on articles and they're telling you, I'm interested in the science articles, or I'm interested in the sports articles. So you're not only getting something about their engagement, but you're getting something about where their mind and heart is, which can be then used. And this is often a bit of a work to get, because I know most of you aren't collecting click-through data, but it's highly relevant. In our consumer packaged goods example we're going to look at, it's the same thing. This kind of click-through data, sentiment analysis, Twitter posts can be really helpful depending on the problem set. And we come down reunion surveys. A lot of our higher ed clients are surveying people at reunions, and you can figure out interests and relationships. There's a lot of data that can be gathered from this. It usually sits on the side because it's not aimed at fundraising. It's aimed at doing some kind of a class profile or something around a reunion. But there's a ton of really good information in here that can be culled out and synthesized and connected in. And then there's social media, and there's a bunch of other stuff. But this set of information, if you look at this, is a trove of information that can help you answer questions like the one at the top. And what you've got to do is get the data in, blend it, synthesize it, bring it all into the entities table. So for each entity, you know something about each of these fact points. And then you can do visual discovery, and you can run predictive models to understand what really matters. And, conceptually, this stuff on the right, the other stuff, is being called the dark data. And that's the stuff that the purpose of the newsletter system is not to collect data for analysis. It's to send newsletters. But the system collects the click-throughs. The same with event attendance. The event attendance system is meant to manage events. But the data can be used in fundraising really, really well. And that's the concept of bringing this dark data that sits on the side as the exhaust of these other systems into the light so it can be used to help make better decisions. So again, we see this a lot. We just talked about fundraising, but the same thing exists in manufacturing, healthcare, network intrusion analytics, retail, and consumer packaged goods. For example, here's quickly a similar analogy in consumer packaged goods. And instead of entities, you've got product sales. And there's some base dollars by brand by week. And there's a bunch of factors in the week, the distribution mode, the promotion. So that stuff's in there. And you could easily do a time series forecast and figure out, every June sales go up or every December they whatever. But that is only part of it. Blog posts. There's all this information circling out there in Facebook and Twitter. There's sentiment engines that can run against it and figure out they're positive, neutral, or negative, and they clearly have an impact on sales. And they may have more of an impact on sales than just periodicity of time. Similarly, if you're a consumer packaged goods company, you have a call center, and people are calling in, and there's complaints, and there's praise, there's different kinds of calls. Those things have an impact on revenue because they're measuring what's the sentiment and the feeling out there in the market. And inquiries. So similarly to the fundraising example, if you go to consumer packaged goods, you think broadly about not just the stuff that's sitting there in the system that everybody traditionally looks at, but the rest of this information that's there is relatively easily gathered. You have to do a little bit of work to get it, but can then be linked in and brought together. So our vision, advisor's vision, is to provide products that let business people do this kind of stuff on their own without having to rely on experts with statistics or database query skills. We'll show an example in a minute. And we want to support that with customer enablement, so we'll do services to help get teams up and running. But we find that people who are inquisitive and have some sense of causality and want to explore can easily do this. The tools make it easy enough today, but you've got to have that inquisitive nature and want to look at things and say, hey, what's really going on here? And the price points on all of this have really come down. So now let's look at some examples. We're going to start with an output, and then we're going to go back into how did you put this together. We're actually going to bring in some click-through data, look at it. We're going to do some modeling against it. But first, let's look at the recommended output. So we have some strong principles here. One is it needs to be easy to use for end users. You generally don't want to put modeling scores in front of an end user group. You want to bucket it. And we're going to look at attachment scores, and we would recommend bucketing into things like, hey, this group are owners, this group are highly engaged, this group is disconnected based on the score from the model, from the data, but it's easy to get at. You want to leverage all the relevant data, just like that an example before with the fundraiser. Go to a flip chart or a whiteboard and start just thinking about what is potentially there that could impact the question you're trying to answer, and be holistic and think broadly. But then you have to blend and synthesize it into useful metrics. Throwing in gift transactions isn't going to help understand who's the larger donors, but figuring out how frequently they've been giving, what their maximum gift to date is, could be very useful. Use visual discovery and modeling to create understanding. We'll see that in a minute. And this whole concept of no coding required. There's been a bunch of writing on this, but that's certainly one of the themes that we and other leading vendors in this space are working to bring to the market. So let's look at an example of first easy-to-use outputs. This is just a page I'm going to click. I'm going to open up what we call a project in a browser. It's loading data into RAM on a server. Then it's going to bring up in the browser a window with a set of pages and charts that describe some data where we've done all of that blending and integration already. And so it opens on a page called Ratings. Again, this is fundraising. We're looking at 55,000 rated prospects. There's a page over here that describes what I'm looking. I'm going to hide it. The blending and the modeling part has been synthesized into something called an attachment score. So there are owners. There's 554 of them. They're the ones that have been to a whole bunch of alumni events, participated in volunteer committees, played every sport they could have, been to every reunion, given all the time. And on the other end, the disconnected are the ones that graduated and left. They haven't done anything. So the scoring algorithm is going to create different scores. Let's take a look. So if I go here, raw attachment scores, here's some people, Harley Oliver and so forth. I'm going to just sort by the attachment scores. So this person, Stevenson, Rose Stevenson, has an attachment score of 2375, been into owner because 10 volunteer committees, gifts of the last 5 years, gifts to 5 years before that, 7 reunions, 2 sports, and so forth. So somebody who put this together looked at the data, ran some models, figured out this was the pattern. These things counted more than these things, counted more than these things, and an algorithm runs this every day on the data and groups these people to owners. If I drop down the list into maybe the detached, here's Arturo Hsu, detached, no committees, been made gifts in 3 of the last 5 years, so it's not completely disconnected, but no gifts before that, no reunions, didn't play any sports, so you get a sense of how this works. The way you'd use this is, let's say, I don't know, we might ask the question, are there any highly rated prospects on this chart? And this is people rated 50 million or more, so somebody also did some wealth screening and scoring. The other end is, people rated 25 to 50,000, and we took off all the unrateds for purposes here. I could grab, with the mouse, let's grab everybody who's rated 250,000 and up. There are 13,911 of them. Some of them are owners, some of them are disconnected, some of them are engaged. So we get the profile here. Let's just drop in on them, and let's grab the highly engaged owners. So I've got 2870 people who are highly rated and also engaged owners. We want to see, are they staffed? Here we've got a list of the staffing assignments for those 2,870 people. It looks like 749 are not staffed. Now that's actually a surprise. Looks like these people, Tanner's got 164 of them. Dan Law's got 69. The bright red ones, which the color scoring here is the bright red ones, are the absolute highest rating, so he's got a great collection. Let's grab the 749, get rid of everybody else. Might go to a map and see where they live. They're going to be all over the country. There's a group in South Florida. There's a few. It looks like there's a couple in Chicago. 12 actually in Chicago. Let's grab South Florida because somebody's going down there. Get rid of everybody else. Go back to my list. And here's the list of the 23 people who live in South Florida could export and take action on. So I want to just go through that to show, people don't respond well to the scoring algorithms and the analysis per se, but if you get this into a frame like this, where it's intuitive and really easy to use, people can do these kinds of examples. And this is like the ROI. It's finding the high capacity, highly engaged prospects. Get them into some kind of a meeting. You might find, they actually, none of them have been in volunteer committees. You could go to that other page and say, let's get them on some committees, but let's cultivate this group, and this can be monetized. So that's where the high return comes from in doing the analysis. You find things you might not have expected, like that high level of unstaffed group here. So let's drop back into the story. We're going to look now at an analytical sandbox, because we just had that example, which had already been set up. It's running. It's being pushed out to a team. But now somebody comes in and says, hey, we just got click-through data in a spreadsheet. We'd like to add it. We'd like to explore it and see what's going on with it. We'd like to synthesize it and see if we can make some sense out of what it is, add it to the model, and then update all the scores and outputs and put this into production and push it out to the team with this new scoring algorithm in it. and we want to do it quickly and collaboratively. We don't want to hire consultants. We don't want to take a month to do this. We want to turn it around quickly, and I've got about 8 minutes, so we're going to do it that quick. So let's see this in action. So I'm going to bring up an authoring tool, the same page we had before, only I'm in our Windows Client Analyst X product. And what I want to do now is load some data. So what did they give me? Here's my spreadsheet. I was given a spreadsheet of click-throughs. So, click-throughs are, here's the date and the time, December 16th at 1:57, and you can see they happen pretty quick. This is literally what the email hoster gets. They all get this. So this is data that you can also get. There's a link name. You can the HTTP colon stuff was cut off, so it's actually the name of what the link was. And the client ID was matched in because this is sending them out to an email that knows what's coming back. And this is just a big spreadsheet of, I don't know how many it is, thousands, 8 or 10,000. What's the bottom? It's like 7,000 click-throughs. So they're not in this project, so I'm going to add them. I go up to this. I've got to load data. I've got to put in a page. Let's load the new data. Click this. I get a wizard. I am going to load a spreadsheet. It's somewhere on my desktop. It's this thing called Newsletter Click-Throughs. Let's open it. Take next. It's going to find that this thing has one worksheet. They're in there. I could bring in a bunch of worksheets. It found that there's something called a click date. It's actually not a string. It's a date. Link name's a string. Client ID should be an integer. Let's take the commas out. Let's look at it. The data view. Yeah, this looks like it got it. Okay, it's going to do something. It's going to load it into my project here with the other stuff that's already here. This has, it looks like 54,000 rated prospects loaded from Oracle tables the night before, now I'm loaded in the spreadsheet. So now it's in. I need to show it somewhere, so I'm going to add a page. I'm going to call this clicks, maybe call it something better, click-throughs. And I've got my page. I'm going to drag it over near ratings because I want them together. I need to put some charts, so I'm going to add charts. I want to say, let's put a bar chart on because you want to see the number of clicks by time. Yeah, I'd like to see, let's do another bar chart because I want to see clicks by ID. Let's put a summary sheet in because I want to look at, by name, the link, how many there were. I actually want to eventually link this to the entity table and see how many people I'm looking at and maybe put a data sheet with names in. So I've kind of built a page. First chart, I'm going to put it on, here's all my tables. So a bunch of these were already there. This is what I just added. Put it on that table. I'm going to put it on the click date, count. I can do count sum averages. You just want to count clicks. So it looks like here, yeah, there's a big spike at the beginning, December 16th, and you kind of it fell off really quick. It looks like actually everything happened in the first few hours. So one observation already is, boy, if I do a newsletter, almost all the response happens in the first few hours. It's really, really fast. And if you're going to anticipate follow-up, it better happen equally fast. This is the day of the speed in the internet. So that's totally showing it. Then this one, let's put it on the same table. Put an ID. I'm really curious. How many? There's some people click through a lot, or not many. And again, I put on a count. I go over here. Here's my IDs of the people who were sent these newsletters, and here's what click through. Looks like most of the people down in here click through once. So there's a lot of people that click through just on one link. Here's a group that clicked through on 2 links, but holy moly, over here, 7, 8. Looks like there's a group on the right side. Got a couple of big clickers. This one clicked through on 54 things, 22. So I've got a wide distribution of click-through things going on. Let's put up another chart because I want to see the links, how many clicks are on the different links. Put it on this table. Put it on the link name. Count it. And sort by this, so I kind of start seeing here. This layout's pretty bad, so why don't we stick this up over here, just rearrange the page a little bit, stick this over here. I'm going to stick the counts up here and fix the page layout. Slide this over and drag this down. So I've got the start of a page here that's starting to make some more sense. And I'm going to put this on the other table, so let's just finish this authoring. I'm going to put this on the entity table. I'm going to count the IDs. This is typically how you'd author one of these things. And again, I'm working across a couple of tables. Here I want to see the names. So I'm going to put it on the entity table. Some field in here called, you can see I've done this before because I actually know the fields, pref name sort. And then somebody's going to say, got it, these titles are pretty bad, so let's do a little editing and then we're going to move on because issue of time. I'm just going to call this number of clicks by date, time, so you can now quickly edit the chart labels. But here I've got a pretty good idea, and I can sort of see this class of 2015 dominated, happy holidays. So there's a group of these articles that got most of the clicks. If I want to see what happened at the beginning, I can click here. Yeah, Rhodes Scholarship came in. Wait, was that in my top list? It was third. So I got all overall class of 2015 happy holidays, Rhodes Scholarship, dramatic moments right at the beginning. I've got a slightly different order, but basically the same. What are the big clickers clicking through? Happy holidays, dramatic, a little bit different ordering. So this class of 2015 is a lot lower for the big clickers. So now that I've got to do another thing. These tables aren't linked because I can't see who's over here. So let's go up here and build a link. Table link. So I want to connect the click-throughs data on a link to the entity table. Put this on newsletter click-throughs, client ID, go to the entity table, which is one of these other tables. This has a lot of tables in it, so this is a pretty rich project. On the ID number. Okay, finish that. So now these tables are connected. Let's just let it finish. So it's telling me, I see a couple of things here. There's 1,813 people in my core systems that click through 3,318 times. I actually see there's some gray over here. I'm just spotting some stuff. That's telling me there's actually some people who click through who are not in my core system. So I'm not sure what that's all about, but that's another issue. If I want to see who the big clickers are now, I can grab them over here. Actually, let's zoom in and grab the real big clickers. Grab these guys. Again, I'm colored by rating now, so I can sort of see I've got none of my high ratings are over here. But here's my big clickers. Clyde and Floyd, and I can see they're clicking across time. I can drill in on their behavior. I want to see my big clickers, have they given much? Yeah, they've given 5 to 10,000, sort of in this range. So I can explore here my big clickers. So that's the concept of visual discovery. I've got some feel for that. My newsletters happen quick. I've got a few big clickers, and a lot of people aren't clicking. And I might also want to know why I've only got 1,800 clicking through out of my population of 54,000 who are getting this. So may not be getting as much penetration with my newsletter articles as I would expect. So now we're going to go into some modeling. I need to create a factor, so I'm going to just show you quickly. I'm going to build an expression. So I can put this information in my entity table, which is back to what we were doing at the beginning. I'm going to call it number of clicks. I already typed this out. So here's an expression that tells this thing to go to the entity table on ID number, link to the newsletter click-throughs on client ID, put a 1 in each row and sum it and put that total back in the entity table. So that's going to give me my entity table, the number of clicks by person. So I'm going to evaluate it. It runs, click OK. So now I need to run a couple of models. I want to see, does these click-throughs have an impact on attachment? So I've selected my people who are rated 25,000 or more. Let's go to the giving history page and look at the people who have actually given 25,000 or more. So what I'm trying to do now is figure out, from an attachment perspective, the things that can build engagement. What tends to make the people who give 25,000 or more different than the others, given all of these people have a capacity to give of 25,000 or more? So I have a target. I'm going to build a predictive model. So we're going to the next step. I'm going to just click here, call this attachment. This is where those scores we saw a few minutes ago came from, a model like this. Go to the entity table. I'm going to click this because I want to grab my group of selected. And I'm going to uncheck everything and just put in the clicks. So that's the field I just created. The number of alumni committees was clicked the same way. The number of gifts in 5 to 10 years back. The number of gifts the last 5 years, number of reunions. So those same kinds of things. I got this twice, volunteer committees. So these factors were done just like I showed you the clicks. It's the clicks I just added. So I'm going to go build the model. So it's running a bunch of models behind the scenes. It's going to pick the one that's the best fit in a few seconds here and show me which of those factors, now including the number of click-throughs, have the most impact on people giving at or above the level they're rated at. So it's going to give it a second here because it just ran through 55,000 rows in those fields. And it's going to tell me that it thinks the model did pretty well, and that numbers of alumni committees have the most influence on people stepping up and giving out of these attachment factors, the number of years they've made a gift in that range, reunions, committees, student activities. But clicks is a smaller impact, so it's not in here. So I might say, well, what if we took alumni committees out? Will that bring clicks up? Does it have a positive influence? So I'm going to edit the model. Let's just drop off numbers of alumni committees. I'm just going to play around with this. I'm just curious. I'm trying to understand, do these newsletters have an impact? And remember, I'm not getting a lot of my population clicking through, so it's going to come out lower because a lot of people haven't clicked. We don't know why, that we want to explore that. So I rerun the model with alumni committees off. It's going to reweight everything. And then, these giving frequency, volunteer committees, student activities, yeah, clicks came up here. Sort of along the same level as sports and a little bit lower than reunion, so it's positive. So that's the good news. I'm building forward engagement attachment with these newsletter clicks. Now the next question, and I'm going to finish up with this, might be, are all of these links doing the same thing? Are they all positive or some of them negative? I just want to know because maybe my articles aren't doing the same thing. So I'm going to build a new model and call this article influence, just for sakes of doing this. So I'm going to run this on the clicks-throughs table. I'm going to keep the same target, and I'm going to look at just the link names. This is going to bin the links into positive and negative influence. Let's see what this does. So it's rescoring on a different table using the same target around those link names. So what happens here? Interesting. This tells me that the Steve Gompers themed article had a pretty positive impact, and the Rhodes Scholarship had a pretty negative impact, and everything else fell in the middle. So there's, we disguise these things obviously, but there's a for the larger donors creating more propensity to give, these kinds of articles have more weight or are more aligned with that population than these kinds. So that's what I've learned out of this. Let's drop back to the storyline for a minute, and we'll wrap this up here. I'm going to open the PowerPoint. And what we learned, what did we just see? We saw that newsletter click-throughs has a positive influence on attachment. Less than some of the other factors, but a positive influence. And the modeling actually created this equation, and clicks is part of it when I ran it without the committees. And it's sort of, this goes into the project and gets scored every day. And back to the example with the bins of owners and highly engaged, it creates the scores which then get binned in those bars, which the users then get to use. And every day they get updated based on the data. So if somebody is highly engaged, but then they got put on a volunteer committee and made a gift and came to a reunion, they'd score up the next day. And that's sort of what we feel is really important, is you get a feeling for what's in all this data to use it so it's fresh, it's frequent, and it's always there and relevant. We also saw that the influence varies. Not all the articles are the same. The Stephen Gompers was positive. The Rhodes Scholarship had a negative influence. It took us about, actually I lied, it took me about 8 to 10 minutes to do that analysis, but I talked a lot. But it's quick. It didn't take me hours. I didn't have to farm it out. I did it really quickly, starting from scratch with a spreadsheet. And if this was real, what I'd probably want to do with these newsletters is test and measure the impact. We know that they're not all the same. You can pilot different messages, segment the prospects into different groups based on response, and then measure this thing. That's the beauty of electronic messaging. It's very easy to adjust it. It's very easy to give different people different newsletter layouts and watch what happens. But we see this kind of thing a lot, that these newsletters do have influence. They are telling you interest areas, and they're not all having the same impact. So, and we've got some clients who, for the annual giving, have segmented populations and message quite differently based on analysis like this. So anyways, in some cases, this is my last slide here, you get dark, really dark data, like in machine manufacturing, and we have something called the blender that can bring the data together in front of Advisor, where here's an example of different tables. It has different transforms, so it can do multi-table blending, a full suite of transforms, merge, and also append to tables, especially in the manufacturing of some of the transaction world. You need to take the data from different places and basically stack it on top of each other and move the columns around to align it. It can do synthesize and blend outputs available to other systems, can push email alerts out. So there's a whole lot of additional stuff we can do with data blending and transformation beyond the simple example I just showed. And at the end, we go back to the key principles. The goal of this data discovery to be successful is to give the end users something that's really easy to use. Leverage all the relevant data. Don't leave it sitting on the sidelines as exhaustive other systems, but bring it in and synthesize it into useful metrics. We just saw some great examples of that. And that click-through data is pretty typical of a lot of the stuff that's in Excel, but within 8 minutes we had it linked in with a bunch of Oracle tables, and we are starting to see a story from it, and we could make it useful, and we could then embed it so it's in a scoring algorithm that updates every day. Use the combination of visual discovery and modeling to create understanding. We did some of that by just looking at charts and clicking on it. We could understand time space. We saw there were some extreme clickers. We could see who some of them were. And then the modeling helped us go a little deeper. We did it all without any coding. So just, the market has evolved to the point where there is just tremendous capability out there to do things with data that was never available before, even a year or two ago. So we encourage you to dig in on this, and we find over and over again when people do this right, they increase revenues, they reduce costs, they get just higher yields, they increase penetration. The ROI of getting this right is really, really high. And our strong held belief is that any organization with inquisitive people who are curious and can not be afraid to just dive in and muck around a little bit can do this kind of work. You do not need a stats degree. You don't need to do SQL-based queries to do this kind of stuff. You just need to have that mind for inquisitiveness and insightfulness. And we as a firm are, just love helping people take this kind of data, just get up and running with it. So that finishes the formal part of the webinar, and we're open to questions. And there's a chat box on the bottom of the panel, the GoToMeeting panel, and there's also the, you can raise your hand, and I'm just right now bringing this up. You can raise your hand, and we'll pick you up and answer your question. So one question, what version of Advisor did you use for the demo today? This is our 6.4 version, which just came out last week. And if you're on support and maintenance, it's coming out. If you don't have it already, it'll be there shortly. And the core enhancements in 6.4 have a lot to do with the data blending. There's big enhancements to the modeling capability, the ability to create multiple models, embed the formulas in the project so they're stored automatically in the update with the data loads. We also done a bunch with our mapping capability and Expression Builder. Another question, are there any plans to extend the Expression Builder's capabilities? A conversion function that converts a generated string to a date would be very useful. A UI for adding columns from selection states would be great too. So yes, some of this we actually already do. Our Expression Builder, which you just saw me quickly go into to build that link calculation, has a full set of mathematical calculations for numbers. It has a full set of string manipulations and capabilities, so you can parse strings, you can key out matching words in strings to create groups, you can combine strings. It's got a bunch of date calculations, so you can subtract dates, transform dates. You can convert a date to a string to a date as long as it's actually in a date format. So you can convert between data types as long as they're convertible. Columns from the selection states would be great. So so all of those expressions get added as new columns in the tables that are loaded. So we load a table from Oracle, and it's got 35 columns, for example. The Expression Builder would add a 36, 37. We just add additional columns in based on the calculations that are done, whether it's the cross-table link that I did or one of the others I just described. Yeah, there's some questions here about the cross-table calculations. And let me just paraphrase. Okay, so there are 3 ways. I'm going to actually back up a bit. 3 ways we can do calculations between tables. One is we have this new data blender, which sits in front of advisors. So when we're an in-memory analytics app, we can bring in, we typically bring in 5, 10, 20, 50. I think our biggest projects might have 130 to 150 tables loaded from RAM, pulled in when the project loads. Usually that's on a script periodically, say once a day. It can be on demand. And we can do the kinds of things I've been talking about and just showed with the expression builder. But there are times when it doesn't make sense to do that. For example, in manufacturing, where you have a bunch of machine data, the tables need to be stacked on top of each other. The columns aren't in the right order. It would be a perfect case to use our new data blender. There are also situations where you want to put the table out in front of advisor, like it's shown here, and use it not only for advisor but for other tools and systems that you want to put in a reporting system. You might want to, and our blender can push out emails based on certain thresholds that might happen in it. So there's a time when you want to do this in front of us. But in the memory pool, you can do cross-table links like I showed, calculations. We can link tables together. We just showed there a link of a one-to-many relationship between the tables. We can copy fields from one table to another in our memory pool. And we can roll up tables. So it might be a transaction table, at the time stamp level. You want to look at it at the month level. We can roll the table up and sum on the month level. Now, why is this valuable? That's the next question. Why would I want to do this in a discovery tool? Well, the problem is the data sits in the forms we've been talking about and showing, and you've basically got 2 choices. Do it in a discovery tool like ours, which is point and click, end user focused, or have a database expert try to formulate the tables in the database, which is doable, but it's usually a group that's backlogged, overloaded, and it's much more of a structured, managed process because it's generally a corporate asset, those databases. So it's harder and requires more technical skills to do the work there. So these end-user-focused data discovery tools are perfect for that kind of environment where, the users need to manipulate the data, don't either have the skills or the access or the permissions to use the core database system to do it, and that group is not really available, doesn't understand the end-user needs. So that's what's making these in-memory-based, flexible, end-user-focused discovery tools very attractive, because you can do the kinds of things I just did, which you never could do before. Just think, if you had to go to IT to get the click-through data sorted out like that, understood first, because it's just you got to look at it somehow and understand it, and then get it merged in with the entity table, and that entity table came from an Oracle database, how hard that would be versus what I did here in 8 minutes. Somebody tell me actually it was 9, but say it's 8 minutes. It was quick and easy. There's some questions on the modeling. What kinds of modeling algorithms is advisor using is generally what the question is saying. So we use a multivariate regression modeling capability, and it is so it basically runs through all the factors in that checklist. The checked factors are called potential explanatory fields, and then it's trying to figure out which ones are most aligned against the target versus the rest of the population. So in that example I ran, the whole population was all of the rated prospects. I actually had already taken out the unrated prospects in Advisor. I selected the ones of that who had given 25,000 or more. So the model now gets past that data. The target is the group of people who gave 25,000 or more. It's comparing them against the entire group that's rated at that level. And then it's running through each checked explanatory factor. In that case, it was numbers of clicks, numbers of activities, and it's trying to figure out, and it does a bunch of math to figure out, is that more of those more likely to be with the bigger donors or less likely? And it does a bunch of log and cube and a bunch of math transforms to get that. When I ran the model, the panel on the left had the different math factors in it, and then it then comes out with the output. So it's a multivariate regression model, pretty rich, and we have a higher end version called Analytic, which is also available, which provides more of the inner workings and the actual math behind it. In Analyst X, which I showed here, we're trying to make it really simple, totally wizard-driven, and integrated with the memory pool. You ran through a lot of information. How much of the data existed in the data, and what did you calculate in Advisor? Give examples. I shut the project down, but when I ran the model, we saw where numbers of clicks came from. It was a click-through spreadsheet, and I calculated by ID number how many clicks they made. The activities in the last 10 years, I did the same thing. There was an activities table, which had all activity participations going back like 20 years. And so we ran a similar expression where we looked at each person and we flagged the date of the activity, and if it was in the last 10 years, we counted it, and then we summed them up in Advisor. So we just basically worked with the raw activities table. Same thing with those gifts. Gifts in the last 5 years, I think there was a threshold of like $50. So if they made a gift of at least $50 in each of the last 5 years, they got a 5. If it was 4 of the last 5 years, they got a 4, and so forth. So we basically just ran through the gift transaction table, figured that out, and put that back in the entity table. And again, it's just one of those simple cross-link expressions. I did one and it took me a minute or two. I could have done all the others, but they were done ahead of time. But that's the kind of thing that we've made it really easy to do, because the gift transactions by itself is useful, but it doesn't, you can't model it. It's just a bunch of transactions. You have to create some metrics out of it about, in that case, frequency, and also you could have had maximum gift as a size of 150 or whatever. So I hope that answers the question. How effective is Advisor in geographic mapping of cities and zip codes outside of the U.S.? Okay, so mapping capability. There's a couple of things we do. We plot on maps. You saw one of those in the example. When we plot on maps, we provide a bunch of U.S. maps. I think we provide all 50 states, major metro areas, U.S., North America. We provide most major countries of the world, continents. But you can just import basically any map. I think most of our maps come from DMaps. It's just a public source mapping company. So you could pop a map of, I think we have Paris. Pick a map of Madrid, and you could pop in a metro area of Madrid. And as long as you have postal codes or some identifier, it can be cities around Madrid, we can then plot to it. So yeah, it's pretty easy to do, and we can help with that. We also have a capability to do geocalculations. So for North America, with the geocodes we provide, you can pick a city. Say, I don't know, we're in Downers Grove, Illinois, and we come with geocodes for the U.S. By zip and also by city. So we can then do a calculation of distance from every city in the U.S. to Downers Grove. So it's going to give every entity a number, 5 miles, 20 miles, 1,000 miles, 3,000 miles, which you can then plot in a histogram, bin it, or just use it as it is in a modeling factor. So for Geographic, to summarize, we can plot on any form of a map image. We come with a whole lot of them, and we can do distance calculations right now for North America. The question about trip planning. Yeah, we really wouldn't use this for trip planning. There's a bunch of questions on maps. Let me go back to the maps page and just open this up. Easiest way is just go back to the PowerPoint, relaunch the project, look at the map for a minute. So just a second, I'm loading back up. We'll see if any other questions. Will Advisor have other predictive modeling types like clustering, decision trees, neural networks? Not right now, and we do, as I mentioned, have a higher-end product called Analytic, which we OEM from Rapid Insight, which we sell and they sell, which is exposes more of the modeling capabilities and does have clustering in it. We've looked at decision trees and neural networks, but we're marketing into a sector of the market, and our claim is you don't need stats tools to do this. So we've at the risk of some of the richness, we've made this a lot simpler to do. So we're looking at those things, but right now, multivariate regression and the higher end has clustering in it. So the maps, just go back to this. I grabbed before the 250,000 rated prospects. I got rid of everybody else. I grabbed the highly engaged owners. I went to my map. So here's an example where whoever put this page together, there's obviously concentrations in the Northeast. There's a map of the Boston area, a map of the New York area, a map of the U.S. We could plot in other maps. But if I'm in the Boston area, I'm going to the western suburbs. If I'm somebody wanted this, I could just grab over this. And there's all of the high-rated, highly engaged prospects in the Boston western suburbs. Look like Weston, Mass. has 16 of them. What's this down here is another one I can sort of see. Dover's got 5 and so forth. Right, and then they're linked. So the beauty of what we're doing, they're all linked. There's 93 people. Here they are on the first page. If I want this list out, I go to the list. I'm in the browser, but I can export the list on my desktop. Stick it down here. And there's a list out of here on my desktop. Shrink this down. Should be able to find it on my desktop. And open it up. Yes, here's the file we put out there. Here's the list of those people. I did my map analysis and whatnot. It's out of Advisor into Excel, 93 people, and I can go with it. So that is what we're doing there. Can you select within a certain mile radius? Yeah, I don't have time to show that right now, but yeah, if we did, you would create the distance calculation. And in the expression builder, it's just a distance calculation. And it would, again, give everybody a distance from a point, which if we're in Downers Grove, Illinois, it's going to be basically the distance, it would be radius from here. And then you plot that in a histogram with the left low and the right high. And what you're going to see with us is probably a big cluster nearby, which is Chicago area. There's probably a big cluster about 1,200 miles away, which is New York, Boston, Washington. There's probably a big cluster 2,000 miles away, which is way on the right, which is the West Coast. And there's probably gaps in between. So that's basically the radius from Downers Grove. And then you could just sweep over, any part of that you want. You could also use the expression builder to bin it into 0 to 100 miles, 100 to 500, whatever you wanted. So yeah, it's very flexible doing that. How are we in questions? Yes, some more coming in. We don't have analysts on our team. How would we get started with something like this? Yeah, so this obviously is a project that somebody built. I'll open it again. And generally, with our company, Advisor, you would retain us to put this together because this has, well, actually I can show you. Let's open the client version. I'm going to show you what's in here. I'm going to go to my desktop. I'm just going to open the project I'm running because we usually, so to answer that question is generally advisors retain. We sell software, but we also put in full projects with services. So we would load the data in, synthesize the data, get something like you've been seeing up and running. We generally run modeling workshops to get initial models built and scored. And then, the team can generally take it from there. And we also, have business analysts. So some of our clients retain us to, they've got a question, the model run, they come to us, we do that for them. But our whole premise is we're enablers. We believe that our clients can do this on their own, and that's what we're all about. I just want to, that question sort of beg what's behind this. I'm going to open the task view again. When you build one of these, you saw me go through some of the steps earlier. There's something called a project workshop. So this project was built. Here's what's behind it. It's got 26 tables. 8 of them are loaded. This is disguised data from an Oracle database. We've rolled some up. I think we've calculated total giving or something, and there's 13 pages, a bunch of charts. There's a bunch of calculations in here. You saw me do one of them. There's links between the tables. There's some data hierarchies. We did some date field parsing. So if we have a date, we can turn it into a year or a month or convert a calendar year to a fiscal year if it's not done in the database. And looks like these tables came in from separate data sources. So here's what's behind it. Kind of here's the tables we've been looking at. If I go to my entity table, here's a bunch of fields in it. I think the scores, you can sort of see what's in here. I haven't run the model on this, but here's some old scores. And so here's all the stuff that's in here. So yeah, we generally set this up, but the back end of our project is fully managed. All the metadata for the project is here. The data sources are here. It's pretty intuitive. Like if I want to go in here and create new data sources. You want to change, it's telling me where it's coming from. Databases is roll up. It's all in a point-and-click pull down here, and it's easy to modify. But again, some of our clients, we have some that have, on their own built 15, 20 projects, have them in production, pushed out to hundreds of people over the web. We have others that have 1 or 2 projects, and they, we work with them closely and more on a retainer basis. Our preference is the former, and we believe that that's totally possible. So looks like we have time for maybe one last question. What advice do you have for a team that doesn't have predictive modeling capability? Okay, so one advice is, whatever you do, this is Doug's common sense on modeling. Make it simple. Like, these are modeling scores, but most people can get this. They want highly engaged owners. There's a bar. It shows how many there are. If you want it, you click it. I've got 6,308 people are highly engaged owners. I don't have to know that that came from this. So that's probably the main thing. Have somebody take the math and the modeling and make it really simple for the end users. And again, I mean, we've kind of been through it, but here's the factors behind these highly engaged. And this is actually helpful at this level. Like, if I want to see, this guy's given a lot, 40 million. He's a very big donor. Let's go down the list. So here's, pick one down the list that's maybe I could bring up. So here's one, Jackson. For example, here's Jimmy Jackson. He's highly engaged because I selected that. He's given 104,000. He's rated pretty well. If I want to cultivate him, I can actually see from the scores what I need to do. I mean, he can't give anymore. He's been giving every year for the last 2 years. He's been to like every reunion, 21 reunions. He didn't play sports or student activities, but it's a little late to deal with that. But what I can deal with is get him on a volunteer committee, because Jimmy, has not been on one, and I know that that's influential, and that can move him up to an owner based on what he's done over here. So I guess the second thing in here is, don't just go with the high-level summary, because the detail does matter and helps you understand, like in this case, what course of action you could take with the people. And so we love this kind of blend between, give this some more room, between the detail but the very, very simple summary. So I think that's, we said we'd be done in an hour. I'm being told we're just about at the hour point. This webinar has been recorded, and we'll have it out within the week, and we'll let you know when it comes out. If you have additional questions, you've got my email from the invite. If they're in the panel and we didn't get to them, we'll come back to you. And I just want to thank you all for attending today, and wish you a warm and good remainder of the week. Take care, and thanks.